Hi, folks. Welcome to Thursday's I Write podcast stroke videocast. I think we'll chat about FMQs, although there was nothing really to chat about. Just the usual. There's a few other things. Leslie Riddoch's written a piece about Kirsty Wark's programme. Danny Garavelli has a piece about Leslie Riddoch's programme. Who else was there, Stewart?
We've got to talk about Gordon Brewer's programme yesterday evening.
Oh, Politics Scotland,
yeah.
which we should really call Politics Unionist Scotland, I think, after yesterday.
Absolutely appalling.
Well, let's just go for it. FMQs. Anything jump out at you?
Ooh. The opening, yes, there was. I suppose there was. It was a review time. So as much as anything, it was what isn't going ahead as what is going ahead. Still not opening call centres and offices. They're no happy about some pubs and house parties, so that councils will have new powers to close any individual pub that they're not happy about, and the police will have new powers to break up house parties they're not happy about.
I think that's a good move. I do think there was a guy on Newsnight last night who was basically advocating, instead of having postcode lockdowns, we'll call it, you should have individual businesses, whatever, lockdowns. I would imagine that would be a hell of a lot more work for the government, but it's going to appease all these people that are sitting, I've no doubt, in Aberdeen going, I'm being punished for people doing it wrong when I did it right.
Not really a lot of work for government, is it? It's a lot of work for
local council. Aye.
Still, most of them have still got about 80% of their staff on furlough.
And that then brings in the next problem, which is, where does the Scottish Government get the money to fund that kind of thing?
Well,
which was a running theme today.
That was something.
At FMQs, everybody wanted more money for everything.
There was some good news, I suppose you could say, that she announced that gyms, swimming pools, indoor activity can go ahead at the end of this month. And hopefully in a couple of weeks, middle of September, sports stadia, professional sport, indoor contact sport theatres. Still not happy about weddings.
Well, she said they were going to look at it. There was nothing really surprising in it. I mean,
I thought it was all Scotland idiot shit show today. I have no idea where these unionist parties think they're going to get votes. And Ruth Davidson, after question one, you had Ruth Davidson had that same look on her face, like the school bully who's just been caught out because she didn't get the answer she was expecting. Well, then the next three questions were going to appear as they did. Absolute nonsense.
What she's doing is opposition by the Sunday Post. That's what she's doing.
It was ludicrous. You've got they're having a competition at the moment to see which one can be the biggest diddy. You've got Richard Leonard bouncing up and doing like a roadrunner with his bloody feet nailed to the feet of the chamber. Wee daft Willie Rennie, who didn't understand what the First Minister said to him and pointed that out by making an even bigger assay cell. And Paddy Harvey's asking for 3,500 teachers, like you can just magic them up out of thin air. I thought it was ridiculous today, and no wonder these people are looking at polls that should mean each of them loses their job.
It's the care homes one, I find astonishing. It's that we're just not going to admit that we're either so stupid or so devious that we know what the rules were.
Well, look, can I point out, it's a bit like when I've said about the journalists the other day, for example, couldn't think of anything particular to ask questions about, but something stupid. It was the politicians today. All they could talk about was the three unionist ones were care homes.
Procedures around care homes that they didn't really. I mean, Richard Leonard was told twice before he asked these questions. They were answered, and the answers to Ruth Davidson, the figures he was asking for will be published at the end of next month.
Well, that was the thing. We've got an ongoing investigation to get you the numbers you want. But what I want from you, Nicola, is to say you knew that you were sending infection into care homes.
I mean, he actually pointed out how stupid he was by saying it shouldn't take a freedom of information request from the Sunday Post. Well, it wouldn't have if you'd been bright enough to put in the freedom of information request that got to the figures, Richard, but you ain't.
I mean, I think it's worth pointing out that the First Minister saved her anger for the end of Ruth Davidson's, after Ruth Davidson's last question, and she sounded angry. I don't think it was, well, you never know, but she said, well, at least at the end of the day, I'll be accountable. She had
I thought her best retort was to Willie. I mean, percentages, 20%, 7%, but the actual statement said percentages up to 450, then 600, and we've exceeded that up to 1,000.
And his other one, which fair play, she didn't slap him for, because to be honest, I think by then she was tired of slapping him, and it's really kind of cruelty when you keep prodding a dumb animal and it makes no difference. But I just wonder, why would foreign students, that he's desperate to get tested, by the way, why would they be arriving in the middle of August when their courses start at the end of September, most of them, and frankly, into October? He's telling you that there's waves of students arriving in Edinburgh now. No, there isn't. Take a look at Edinburgh Airport.
He bumped into one guy in Fife who's a student and hadn't gone home.
Yeah, well, maybe he's trying to impress Boris Johnson after us. Boris Johnson's supposed to be on holiday in his constituency. He did, the First Minister, well, Willie Rennie, he tried to have a sly dig about, some stupid political dig about if you've been watching the border more than caring about.
What? I mean, I was disappointed she didn't turn around and say, oh, Willie, when did we get permission to control borders?
No, she scalped him. I forget exactly what she said, but no, she scalped him. Jimmy, you might remember what he said.
Well, more to the point, was Willie knowing the camp that said there isn't a border? I don't know.
That's kind of...
A few weeks ago, there wasn't any. So maybe she's watching Border Bookshop waiting for an exciting new tome to come in explaining how to speak to arseholes, Volume 1, because that's about the only thing that she needs to deal with the opposition leaders in Holyrood. I think she must actually get bored going there on a Thursday. She must get a sore hand scalping them all.
It's actually amazing that what this pandemic has done, is highlight the inadequacies of both the opposition at Holyrood and at the Daily Pressers, the inadequacy of our mainstream media.
No wonder people are throwing up their hands saying, look at the polls and look, what do we have to do? We're going to be fine next year and we're going to get independence.
It's noticeable, you know, I forget the saying, but they do say that, you know, the cream rises to the crop when they're tested. And I would say that the cream may have risen to the top, but there's an awful lot that has went round the U-bend during this pandemic, and most of them wear blue, red or orange rosettes.
Quite true. One piece of slightly disturbing news was right at the start, First Minister giving a report, and there were 77 new positive cases yesterday, and that's the highest number in Scotland for 3 months.
Yeah, I think, Stewart, that we're going to be looking through over the weekend at this Cooper Angus thing becoming a big story, because just the fact that it's in there and it is such a big factory, 900 employees. So if even a small percentage of them get the virus and pass it on to their family, we could be looking at a major outbreak that makes Aberdeen look a bit pedestrian.
However, there is another side to that, and I think the First Minister referred to that the other day. They've got the experience of what happened in Anglesey. It was a big factory in Anglesey as well, similar kind of factory. So she said, well, we've got the experience of how to handle that already. So fingers crossed.
Well, I mean, this is going to be ongoing, and very shortly the opposition are going to be screaming about why we didn't have lockdown for longer.
Chicken lockdown. Why didn't we have chicken lockdown? That'll
No.
be what Will Rennie goes on, because you ken how he's got a lovely propensity to handle a farm animal
Well,
and encourage
that
them to do strange things on camera.
this is strangely enough going to destroy. This is going to be a real cross for Boris's government to bear. But strangely, in Scotland, the way I see it going is the opposition are going to be the ones that suffer. It's not going to be the Scottish government. She's played this politically really well. And it might even be accidental just by doing the job as well as she can and being upfront and honest.
I think you're right. I think she's just, they were all kind of caught in the headlights when this thing kicked off. But her instincts have led her to be cautious, and that caution has proved to be pretty useful when you look at what's happened down south.
Yeah.
And the fact that what is now acceptable in this country is that there is a much higher prevalence in one part of the country. That one part of the country that is led by a bumbling idiot who wishes to take no hands-on, no real hands-on part of being in government. He wants to be on holiday. He wants to delegate to other people so he can away play with his fancy piece in his new bairn.
He's not capable. Look, the history of this man's position in any authority is that he's not capable of actually being a leader. He's just...
Aye, but what he's managed to do, Stuart, he's got the entire media accepting obfuscation and lying about figures. These include deaths. We can't even get a clean number of how many people have died in England. And every newspaper, every TV station and every radio outlet is accepting that. If Nicola Sturgeon wouldn't clearly tell people how many folk were dying, she would be getting nailed to the wall on that.
Well, I mean, I see it from the other point of view. I see it from an extremely worrying point of view that to some extent they're cowed. The BBC is cowed or in the hands of acolytes of that part of the Conservative Party. We've got the press, of course, in the hand of foreign oligarchs. I mean, they really are. It's their fate. Boris Johnson is the man for the. But you know, he represents the far right and the people that own the media.
Yeah, I mean,
I think the mistake he's made this time, when he was mayor of London, he had the good sense to employ good people. His problem here is he's decided that he needs to fill his cabinet with Brexiteers. And it turns out, surprisingly, Brexiteers aren't very competent.
They're not the smartest, they're not the sharpest knives in the drawer.
Well, of course, and he doesn't want people to challenge him in his cabinet either.
Okay, let's have a chat about Leslie Riddoch's piece in the National.
It was very interesting that Leslie Riddoch, I didn't think she would even write about the Kirsty Wark hatchet job on Alex Salmond. I'm not going to discuss what she's done. We've discussed that already. But Leslie Riddoch, who's almost certainly knows Sarah Smith, Kirsty Wark, Danny Garavelli, Kirsty Strickland, all these women that worked for the BBC, she must know them all really well because she's been worked in the BBC for 20 years. She's an avowed feminist herself. She said at the beginning of her article that she didn't really want to dip her toe in, but she did, and she gave a fairly even-handed description of the programme. She didn't think it should have been done. She said it was badly done, that it was what we said, it's a show about Kirsty Wark rather than about Alex Salmond. But since then, Leslie Riddoch has been, social media has been torn to ribbons, absolutely torn to ribbons.
By who?
Let's put it this way. People have been calling the alphabet, how many are there? 10, 7? The alphabet women,
9.
witches and things like that. And I don't think Leslie Riddoch's used to seeing that sort of stuff on comments.
I mean, she said herself that she found it quite difficult as a feminist. She found herself, I think what she was saying, between two stools, which was, like many people, myself included, support for the women.
Me Too movement needs support.
Yeah. And support for a man that was found not guilty. Now, my problem I think is becoming. I'm still confused about where I really stand on this. I think I have a problem that if you're given anonymity and you go to court and you lose your case, okay, keep your anonymity, but are you entitled then to hide behind it on various media programs, various media outlets, giving quotes to Danny Garavelli in two different situations, to Kirsty Wark? That sits uncomfortably with me. That doesn't seem like you want anonymity. That seems like you want protection from criticism of your own views.
Protection from criticism of your own actions.
Well,
they're still making a case that Alex Salmond assaulted them after the court found that he didn't. And frankly, their supporters are making the case a hell of a lot louder.
Well, I mean, that's my problem. Are you entitled to maintain your anonymity when you will not accept the result of the court case?
And throw yourself around the media circuit in Scotland looking for sympathy. Because they still chuck out quotes like, some of these women have got alarms in their house and cameras and they're worried they've been threatened for their death. How can they be threatened if they're anonymous?
Well, they're not anonymous. There's a lot of people know who they are. They're just not allowed to put it
here's
into
another
the
point
public
that
domain.
just struck me. The Crown Office and the police, an awful lot of police resources were devoted to this case. Possibly, we just don't know the total cost of it yet. They must be getting fed up having to consider yet another case of contempt of court because of this programme.
Well, I mean, on Twitter yesterday, somebody said the Crown Office had contacted the makers of the Kirsty Wark programme. Mm-hmm. It then disappeared off iPlayer for a short time. And Jimmy, you think it's come back, but it's been edited.
Well, people have said that it's back, but it's been edited. I've not bothered to go and have a look because, frankly, I'm not particularly interested. If Kirsty Wark gets done for contempt, Barry, I don't think anybody should be getting done for contempt. Contempt is basically, and I know why it exists, but frankly, when they bring prosecutions for contempt to court in Scotland, it's a bit of navel gazing for the legal community for me. There's no real requirement for it to be done.
Is it an issue of contempt if you don't accept the verdict of a court case? Because that seems a little bit more contemptible to the law.
But bear in mind the Tommy Sheridan situation, where he ended up in a mess because he got done for perjury, didn't he? Now, how come that's not been talked about here?
Well, nobody's been proved to have lied.
It's not, I was going to say.
The women have made allegations that weren't proven.
Right.
Nobody has been found to have actually lied, although I would suggest the woman who alleged attempted rape on an occasion when she wasn't found to be in Butte House, that's pretty close to perjury in my book. But whether you could then go and prove perjury in that case would be pretty difficult.
Yeah. I mean, it's a mess, an absolute mess. Jerry Hassan even talked about it. He was kind of even-handed. I wasn't sure which. Sometimes I'm not quite sure before I read these articles about the situation, which side they're going to come down on. But he too was very critical of the program.
I couldn't come down absolutely on a side here, and that's maybe the big problem with the whole thing.
Staying away from the Alex Salmond trial, the program, the way it was made. It was bad. I think Leslie Riddoch said, and she should know, it was badly made, not just wrongly made. And she suggested that it did because of her Kirsty Wark's importance. Don't forget, she gets £200,000 a year from the BBC. Her husband runs the production company that made it. She said, if an ordinary person makes a program like that, that would have gone up to the BBC for final editing. That wouldn't have happened because of they're so powerful. Talking about Alex Salmond being powerful, Kirsty Wark and her husband are very powerful.
Yeah, and they have access to the BBC, which Alex Salmond doesn't do.
I wouldn't like Kirsty Wark and her husband Clement coming after me.
No, no.
Be like the sun coming after you.
Okay. Are we going to move on from Alex Salmond,
What
Jimmy?
about Gordon Brewer?
That was, I tweeted yesterday that this must be the new BBC tactic after the Wark docu-soap. Didn't really have anybody allowed to say a good word about Salmond. Brewer managed a whole program with no SNP representation at all. I think there's 4 different people on the program attacked the SNP, and no SNP answer was there heard.
You know, you could bad enough just having the opposition against the government. You had four opposition points of view, and the government not there.
Presumably that's BBC tactics when the polls are quite so bad.
Well, the only difference between having 4 people there with no SNP to speak, it was very reminiscent of 2014 when there was continually 4 unionists and 1 SNP, so they were only slightly outnumbered 4-1, whereas now they're not even getting the 1. They're just totally silenced.
I mean, it's appalling. Now, somebody else, there was, I'm sorry, I'll just carry on, sorry.
Okay.
Brain sometimes goes that way. My new teeth.
It's your new teeth.
Just when you're on about that, mate, I had a quick look at the BBC Charter, in the new one, because people have been keep going on that the BBC has to protect the union at all costs and all that stuff. And what it actually says is that the BBC has a duty to reflect, represent and serve the diverse communities of all of the United Kingdom's nations and regions. Do you think BBC Scotland managed to do that yesterday?
Did you read the whole thing, Jimmy?
Did I? Hell, it's about 72 pages.
I think you'll find there's a paragraph in there that basically says they have a duty to help maintain the unity of the union.
I've heard this said many, many times.
I found it once.
Nobody's ever pointed me to that paragraph. I've heard it said countless times.
I wouldn't say the unity of the union. You've got to defend
the state. See, there's the 3 of us talking about it. Somebody find it and show me it, because I've heard it said so many times on so many social media platforms, and I'm yet to see.
Okay.
I'll have a look at my huge BBC biased file.
It definitely changed in 2016. The charter changed.
Yes, it did.
There were changes to the wording, but if it's hidden away there that they are secretly pro-union and that they're not secretly pro-union. If they're meant to be secretly pro-union, they're crap at it.
Oh, they're not meant to be.
Well, I don't think they're meant to secretly be pro-union.
They have the duty
they're meant to be pro-union.
The state. They're a state broadcaster, and they're a duty to defend.
Well, Stewart, you say that every day, and yet I'm yet to see that paragraph that points that out.
Look, there was a time when I could have said I could find things like that, but these days I no longer have the search engine that'll search through every document on the computer.
I think there's several levers at work with the BBC. They're terrified of losing the license fee is the first one. They're also terrified that they get someone in charge there who has an agenda, a political agenda, and they lose any right to call themselves unbiased because what's handed down.
Sorry? Hit with a £750 million stick. That was the government kicking them into line by saying you're paying for the license fees for the over 75s. That was political. That was nothing to do with money. That was all to do with kicking the BBC into line.
Well, I know one pensioner who's 77 was very annoyed about having to pay for this license now. Very annoyed.
Well, the thing is, it's the old people that suffer, mate. Not only are they going to get these bills dropping through their door, but they're more likely to pay them. You know, if they sent a bill like that to somebody in my age, they'd get told to ram it. And when the BBC boy turns up at your door and says, "Do you use the telly?" I'd tell him to ram it again. He's not allowed inside the house.
Well, I
do anything about you not paying them.
I actually think that this is one of those unforeseen circumstances once. I think there's going to be blowback from this for the Tory government. I don't think they quite realise, because they've never been poor, that when you're in your 70s and living on a pension, the only entertainment you have is the box in the corner.
Aye,
For
175
so many
quid.
people, you know, and I think they're going to get a shock. I think it'll cost them votes.
I think it should be in the SNP's manifesto for next year.
That and pensions.
That and pensions, aye. The commitment that they made on pensions last year at conference should be a policy commitment. And they should also say that over 75s will not have to pay for a BBC television licence.
BBC, you mean an SBC, Scottish
SBBC,
Broadcasting Company.
Aye. Well, how annoyed would Boris Johnson be if the Scottish government actually picked up that tab? How big would it be? And how much bother could it cause the government in London? It's maybe worth picking up that tab just to cause them the bother.
Which is why we don't have all the financial levers, because the last thing the Tories want us to do is start paying for our over 70s BBC licence fee.
Good God, a successful Scotland where the people are happy. England would implode in upon itself at that point.
You're not wrong there.
I noticed that there was some good polls, very interesting polls published this morning.
You're not talking about the Wings ones, are you?
Oh, that was hilarious, actually. Well worth a read, just how stupid people are.
It scares the living daylights out of me just how many cabbages are actually in the same patch as me.
I've got to hope that a high percentage of them were just ripping the piss.
You've got to imagine that some of the, once you've seen the way the questioning was going, you were going to manipulate the answer.
Should maybe give our listeners a wee explanation. Wings produced 10 questions that he'd asked in a poll that included, did you think it was possible for the Earth to go around the sun and then change to the sun going around the Earth? Such questions on that note, and it was surprising how high the percentage of people were that believed it was possible.
I believe 8% of people believed that 2 and 2 could make 5.
What was it? The Canute question. Can you turn back the tide?
Oh, well, I missed that one. I'm missing the fun side of today. I was looking at some polls. They were looking at the 55 to 45% in favour of independence poll and breaking it down to the different age groups. And it
was Business for Scotland.
Was it 78% of young people want independence? I think it's only people over 55. It's the only age group that wants the union.
Aye. There's also, I think, the direction of all these polls is most entertaining for us, and that's when you start getting people like George Galloway suggesting a change to the franchise for a Scottish election, and Michael Gove, and who else was it that jumped on the back of that? Andrew Neil. I mean, Andrew Neil, come on.
Andrew Neil, who spends half his time in France, wants the right to vote in a Scottish referendum because he was born Scots and hasn't lived here for most of his life.
The only thing Scottish about him is a box of Weetabix where he supplies his hair pieces.
Okay. So we've got Mad Galloway, who's, I don't know, I used to have time for George Galloway. What happened to him?
He stole a lot of money for a charity, turned into an asshole, and he's been an asshole ever since. Oh, sorry, I'm not allowed to say that, am I?
No, he allegedly.
Aye, well, George, sue me. Please sue me. Turn up at my door with the writ yourself, mate, because I'd bounce you up and down every street in Leith, you fat clown.
I would just give him a nice red catsuit.
Aye. Set the dig on him.
It's interesting, though, when people like Neil, not so much Gove and Gallagher, but Neil wanting to change the franchise. I'm beginning to think you're right, Stewart. I'm beginning to think maybe they are a bit rattled.
I think they're rattled. They're rattled.
It's always weird when somebody wants to move the goalposts, isn't it?
It's very unionist.
It's, apparently the question has got to be remain or leave as well, because we're not allowed to have yes. We've made far too much of a success of that as a branding.
That's a good point. What else has happened in Scotland today? I was telling Norrie before you came in, Jimmy, that maybe you caught the end of it. This new group on Facebook, Believe in Scotland, run by Gordon McIntyre Kemp, who runs Business for Scotland.
Mm.
It's subtitled the new Yes campaign, and Gordon is the leader. No, he's very close to the SNP. I hadn't noticed this was the new campaign. The new Yes campaign had started.
I had a quick check of that. I think you misread that. I think that was a subtitle.
What was it? Which bit's the subtitle?
The new Yes campaign. I think that was an indicator that this was the shape he would like to see the new Yes campaign take.
Well, we'll see how it develops over the next couple of days, but he's certainly very keen to get the numbers up. I mean, he does have, I'm sure he has SNP money. Does he not? Business for Scotland, or does he raise his own?
I don't know. I know nothing about his political affiliations.
He does produce some very
He
polished
produces good
material.
stuff.
Oh, aye,
Good
his
stuff.
stuff was brilliant last time and has got better over time.
Yeah, his writing his writing has improved a lot.
And it was his
much
poll
more
yesterday.
concise.
Aye,
Yeah,
he's as thin-skinned as everybody else. He's perfectly happy to ban people rather than engage with them if he thinks he's better than them, smarter than them, or even worse if they use profanity, because he's one of these people who thinks that profanity is an indicator of stupidity, which in my book makes him a bit of a fud, but I do like his work.
I have to say he's one of the few where I've seen an improvement in his writing. I'm afraid quite a lot of the bloggers who I admired back in 2014, I find a bit long-winded now.
I'd agree with you, but I think a lot of people spent too much time in the Twitter sphere, mate. I think people have got too thin-skinned at times, and I think they invested too much in it. They believe too much in what they say or what they write. I think you've got to take it where the whole thing has to be taken with a pinch of salt, because at the end of the day, we're dealing with clowns. Even the SNP politicians, you have to remember what Billy Connolly said all them years ago: the desire to be a politician should automatically ban you from being one. So all these people are grasping at power all the time. So you've got to keep a sense of humour and take everything with a pinch of salt, because at the end of the day, we're dealing with a class of people who, frankly, are happy to look down their nose at us, and a lot of them are happy to trod upon us to get to where they need to get to.
But we've said it so many times that the major strength of the SNP has always been, especially that cohort that went down to Westminster, they had other careers.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't professional politicians.
We're pointing out, I'm glad you brought them up, because it was apparently a dozen of the SNP MPs at Westminster have written to Peter Morrell. They're not happy. Oh no, Angus MacLeod, is it? The Secretary of the NEC. They're not happy about the new rule about that's the one that's kept Joe Cherry out of Central.
I can completely understand that. I have no understanding of why, for example, I think all three of us are kind of agreed. It's going to be the Scottish Parliament, and it's going to be in Edinburgh that the independence question is mostly settled. It's going to be driven from here. So why would we want to exclude a talent pool that's working in Westminster from being part of that decision-making process? It seems madness to me.
Well, no, they weren't to know when at last December's election that they were going to be completely useless. They were still hoping that they might hold the balance of power.
Exactly.
So
we sent some of our finest down there, and now we're cutting them off at the knees and saying, by the way, you're doing there for 5 years and you ain't coming back up here.
Well,
seems a bit short-sighted.
I really do think that if they reverse that decision, it will do more good than practically anything else.
Just thinking
that they could do.
It strikes me as well that quite a considerable amount of people sitting on the NEC wish to stand as candidates, and actually blocking anybody from standing as the candidate, making a decision that blocks anyone when you yourself want to stand as the candidate, is pretty self-centered.
Well, I think somebody should put forward to the NEC that nobody can stand on the NEC without first resigning from the NEC. And see how many of them like their teeth pulled that way.
Well, there's quite a lot of them, mate. There's particularly what you just mentioned about people going down that had careers. And there's quite a few people standing as candidates this time around, or standing to be candidates this time around, who have had no career. Their career has been school, university, and a wee spad job. And I'm not happy about people off that ilk being candidates when there's a huge amount of people with lived experience who, in my opinion, should be ahead of them.
And they tend to, I would call most of these people are carpetbaggers as well. I mean, they've decided they're going to go into politics. They're in Scotland, they're a certain age, and there's no point joining any other party other than the SNP. They're not in the SNP for what the SNP stands for.
Yeah, they're not there to see what they can do for the SNP, but what the SNP can do for them.
Absolutely.
Exactly. It's an ongoing battle that I think it could actually come to a head if they do not reverse this NEC decision, because I'll tell you what, I guarantee you there'll be an awful lot of people want to stand up. Oh, you can't go to conference this year, can you? There'll be a lot of people want to take a position on Zoom to talk about this at conference.
Well, isn't it convenient that there isn't the NEC, which seems to be, it smells a bit. I'm not going to say it's corrupt, but it smells a bit. It's a bit unfortunate it's this year that it needs really challenged, and then there's no conference that everybody can turn up to, even if you're not a delegate. You can't even hang out in the hotels nearby.
Well, it's a big test, I have to say. It is a big test for me personally. If they don't do something about it, I would have to think about my membership.
Can I just rewind a bit to the Business for Scotland? I'm just thinking about Business for Scotland. See, it's not an official SNP organisation. I was looking at Scottish Review. It used to be the fellow that used to run that. He was very unionist, but in another way, he died, unfortunately. He was a nice fellow, apparently, well respected. But it's improved since he's died and moved on, because he was very too strong unionist. There's an iScot. There's another publication that's not so controversial as some, like Commonweal or Bella or Wings. One of these magazines is actually an official SNP magazine. Which one is it?
It's not iScot.
It's not iScot.
iScot basically invites people to write for it. It's not like, doesn't have in-house.
Is that the one that's very, you can sign up for the very glossy monthly magazine?
Yeah.
Or you can, but for £1, you can buy a download version once a month.
Yeah, it's actually very good. I mean, it's not.
Does Peter write for that? Peter Bell, is that one?
Yeah. I mean, it's the kind of Spectator-ish feel. No, it doesn't really even have that. It's difficult to place, actually. But it's an enjoyable read. It's an entertainment, I would say.
I used to read it.
Comes out once a month, so it's hardly on the cutting edge of things. It looks at kind of the bigger picture stuff.
I'm sure I read recently that there is one of these magazines that is actually an official SNP magazine. I was quite surprised because it doesn't have much of a high profile. I'll dig it out. I'll find out what it is. Talking about Peter Bell, have we mentioned yet in any show that he seems to have been getting persecuted by Facebook?
Yes, we did mention it. That
was while I was away, was it?
His links weren't showing up on Facebook. So I don't know anything about that.
He's now removed himself
from Facebook.
He's not on Facebook at all, and Facebook made it impossible for you to post any of his stuff. You couldn't even post a URL at that point. He just had enough, so he's nothing to do with Facebook anymore at all.
That's a pity.
See, he was having a bit of a go at what's this fella's that's having them that come taking the is it the UK government to court?
Peter Wishart.
Well, he's having to go at Peter Wishart. He's having to go at
Martin Keating's. Martin J. Keating's.
Keating's about taking, is it the UK government to court for the Section 30 order? It sounds a bit complicated to me because up until last week, I think the Scottish government were involved, and now aren't. But no, Peter was having a go at.
Scottish government were never involved in that.
No, they were. They had a submission in amongst it, but they've withdrawn the submission.
Aye, but it wasn't their case.
No, it wasn't their case, no.
Aye. Sorry.
I mean, the big issue there is there is some people they can't agree on what, if he loses the case, does that mean that it's another impediment towards getting a referendum?
Aye, but this guy's adamant that he knows better than everybody within the independence movement.
Well, his position is win or lose makes no difference.
But Peter,
lose makes no difference.
All right. But Peter's article really focuses on Pete Wishart, and he doesn't have to take him to pieces today, because you know, he points out just how Pete Wishart is so settled in his seat there in Westminster. Don't forget, Pete Wishart was looking to become the Speaker. He's got his feet that far under the table down there. He was hoping to become the new Speaker down there.
Stuart, sorry. No, he had no chance of ever becoming the Speaker. He was taking a piss.
Are you right?
Oh, I mean, could you imagine them putting a Scottish nationalist in the Commons position of Speaker? Hell would have to freeze over twice.
Aye. The early hell's waistcoat would be in the freezer permanently.
Anyway, I can recommend Peter Bell's article. It's still easy to find, even without Facebook. The way he tears what Pete Wishart, because Pete Wishart was commenting about the case, the legal case, and then Peter Bell was commenting about Pete Wishart.
Pete Wishart's position is he's not going to give money to the crowdfunder for the case, and it's because he's not sure losing wouldn't have ramifications.
But it's fun.
Oh, how upsetting, gents. I've just found out I've been blocked by the majority on Twitter.
By who?
The majority. That
Effie Deans or the history.
The majority that came into being just as they didn't. Just as they became the minority.
Aye, I'm assuming it's an integrity. It's been given a few quid for the Integrity Initiative grant scheme, because their website and some of the materials is pretty high production values, but they're absolute Looney Tune unionists. And I decided to engage with them a wee bit this morning on Twitter, and clearly the boy doesn't like truth, or my version of truth, because
the majority.
Well, I just asked him why he was so upset that I said that people that weren't born in Scotland weren't Scottish. And I referred to them as outsiders, and he kind of got all upset about that. And then, fair play, I went to town a wee bit, but blocked. How I'm bereft. I'll have to go and have a lager and think about that, and see if give myself a good shaking for being so rude to people on Twitter.
Jimmy, I'm sorry, you're not getting any lager. It's going to have to be cider, mate.
Force me.
I don't see why you have to suffer and become a lager drinker.
You're probably right, mate. It's been a while since I've had a lager.
Okay, guys. Oh, sorry.
We got to mention the referee. He managed to get into the news. Douglas Ross. Well, we know the permanent secretary refused to answer one of the silly questions at the inquiry the other day, and the three musketeers.
Leslie Evans.
The three musketeers: Alec Cole-Hamilton, Murdo Fraser, and who's the third one?
Bailey.
They weren't happy that
What's Doug got to do with this?
I'm not going to. What's Doug got to do with it? Well, he's now written to the Cabinet Secretary, Mark Sidwell, claiming that because the Permanent Secretary didn't answer, she's broken the civil service rules. Are you worried? I'm not worried.
It's interesting because the remit of the inquiry is set out and the chair decides what's within the remit, not Alex Cole, Hamilton, Bailey and Murdo Fraser.
And not the Cabinet Secretary in London.
And certainly not Sir Mark Sedwill or Douglas Ross either. And the first thing that Linda Fabiani did was read out a list of do's and don'ts. And the third thing that Murdo did, because it was his third question, was break one of the rules that she'd laid out to him. He asked about something that is not within the remit of the inquiry. So basically, Turdo is trying to stretch the remit of the inquiry to make it political.
This was never an inquiry. This was always going to be a retrial, as far as the opposition were concerned, of Alex Salmond.
As much as they can.
And all three parties jumped on the bandwagon. So next time they ask for an inquiry, they should turn around and say, right, okay, you can't have an inquiry because you keep breaking the rules of inquiries, so bugger off.
Well, you do think, given the aesthetic nature of how Jackie Bailey wanders through life, the last thing she'd want to be attached to is a witch hunt. I mean, seriously, I'm very tempted to buy the lassie a few pointy bonnets and send them up to Holyrood by express courier. Or am I
actually,
being
again, I have to admit, she was about the best at asking her questions.
I thought actually she's far better in that role than she's ever been speaking about anything. When she's got a script in front of her and she can drill down, she clearly wrote some cracking questions and she got to some decent answers as well. It's just a shame that her ambitions lie far higher and she actually still considers herself to be a representative politician and possible leader of the Scottish Party.
We're going to have to watch ourselves, Jimmy. We just complimented a member of the Labour Party. We'll be getting talked about.
Them, mate. I'm going to wash away that compliment with a little bit of apple juice now.
Okay, I think we'll call it a day at that. Thank you, Stewart Lockhead, Jimmy Hutton. I'm Norrie Stewart. Thanks for listening, folks. And we'll catch you up tomorrow. Don't forget your hats. So cheers for now, folks.